I want to answer 3 questions. What the rings are really made of, how they may have formed, and if we move from beauty to survival, could humans ever colonize Saturn at all? Saturn is the 6th planet from the Sun and the 2nd largest world in the solar system. It orbits at an average distance of about 1.4 billion kilometers, which means it is roughly 9.5 times farther from the Sun than Earth is. But distance is only the beginning. When people hear the word planet, they usually imagine a surface, rock, dust, mountains, a place where something could land. Saturn is not that kind of world. Saturn is a gas giant. It is made mostly of hydrogen and helium, and it does not have a solid surface in any normal human sense. What we see from the outside is not ground. It is atmosphere, deep, layered, violent atmosphere. And that changes everything, because Saturn is not really a place you stand on. It is a colossal planetary system of gas, gravity, storms, moons, and rings. And that is exactly why the rings feel so strange, because Saturn itself is almost impossible to picture as a place, but the rings feel visible, structured, almost physical. So what are we really looking at? From far away, Saturn's rings look smooth, almost like glowing bands carved around the planet. In reality, they are nothing like that. The rings are made of countless separate particles, mostly water ice, mixed with rock and dust. Some of these particles are tiny, like grains. Others are much larger, more like chunks of ice or boulders. So the rings are not one object, they are a swarm. And that is what makes them so fascinating. They stretch across an enormous distance, yet many parts of the ring system are surprisingly thin. That means what looks gigantic and solid from far away is actually a very flat, very delicate orbital structure made of billions of individual pieces all moving together around the planet. And inside that structure, there is even more complexity: waves, gaps, fine bands, spiral patterns, shadows, disturbances caused by nearby moons. The rings are not just beautiful, they are active. They are one of the most complicated visible systems anywhere in the solar system. The next question is obvious. Why are Saturn's rings rings? Why did all that material not just come together and form another moon? The answer has a lot to do with gravity. Some of the ring material orbits too close to Saturn to easily merge into a single large object. In this region, Saturn's tidal forces can prevent loose material from gathering into a stable moon. In simple terms, the planet's gravity does not just hold the ring particles in orbit, it also keeps disrupting their attempts to become something bigger. That is one reason the rings stay rings instead of turning into a single satellite. But gravity alone is not the whole story. Saturn's moons also shape the rings. Some of them help carve gaps, sharpen edges, create waves, and maintain order through orbital resonances. That means the rings are not just orbiting Saturn, they are constantly interacting with the rest of Saturn's system. So the real picture is not planet plus rings. It is a giant connected system where the planet, the moons, and the ring particles are all influencing one another all the time. So Saturn does not have rings because it is a decorative planet. It has rings because its gravity and its moons keep forcing this material to remain in a fragile, unstable balance. And now we get to the biggest question in the video. Where did Saturn's rings come from? There is not one final answer yet, but there are several strong possibilities. One of the leading ideas is that the rings are the remains of something that got too close to Saturn and was torn apart by its gravity. That something could have been a moon, a comet, or some other icy body that crossed the wrong boundary and did not survive. If that is true, then Saturn's rings are not a creation story. They are a destruction story. And that makes them much more interesting. Because when you look at Saturn from far away, the rings feel elegant and orderly, but they may actually be the frozen debris of a catastrophic event. Even stranger, the evidence from the Cassini mission suggests that the rings may be much younger than Saturn itself. That means Saturn may have existed for a very long time, without the ring system we now think of as its defining feature. If that is right, then we are living in a surprisingly special moment. We are seeing Saturn during one temporary phase of its history, not necessarily the way it always was, and not necessarily the way it will remain. Will the rings last forever? Probably not. That may be one of the most unsettling things about Saturn. The rings look eternal. They feel permanent, but they are most likely not. They are gradually losing material. Some particles drift inward. Some interact with Saturn's magnetic environment. Some eventually fall into the planet. The rings are not frozen in time. They are evolving. So Saturn's most famous feature may only be temporary. That is a strange thing to say out loud, because we talk about Saturn as if the rings are part of its identity, like they were always meant to be there, but they may be more like a phase than a destiny. And if the most iconic thing about Saturn is temporary, then what is the planet itself? Once you strip away the beauty and just look at the physics. Without the rings, Saturn is still extraordinary. It is an immense world made mostly of hydrogen and helium, rotating very quickly, wrapped in powerful atmospheric motion, and hiding a deep interior that we still do not fully understand. Inside, scientists think there is a denser region made of heavier elements, buried beneath layer upon layer of compressed material. A day on Saturn lasts only about 10.5 hours. A year lasts almost 29 Earth years. So it is a world where local motion is fast, but the orbit around the sun is slow. And everything we see on the outside, the bands, the colors, the cloud structures, belongs to the atmosphere, not to a surface. That matters for the colonization question. Because once you remove the illusion of planet equals place, Saturn becomes much harder to talk about as a destination for humans. If the question is literal, could humans colonize Saturn itself? The honest answer is no. Or at least, not in any form that resembles a normal colony. Not just because it is far away. Not just because it is cold, but because Saturn is not a stable platform for human settlement. There is no solid ground to build on. The atmosphere only gets deeper, denser, hotter, and more hostile as you descend. The winds are powerful. The pressures become extreme. Any idea of floating cities would already be far into speculative engineering. So if we are being serious, Saturn itself is not a good colony target. But that does not mean the Saturn system is irrelevant. Because when people imagine colonizing Saturn, the smarter question is not whether we could live on the planet. The smarter question is whether we could live somewhere in its system. And that changes the answer completely, because the real future of Saturn is probably not on Saturn at all. If humans ever build a lasting presence in the Saturn system, the most realistic candidate is not Saturn. It is Titan. Titan is one of the most remarkable moons in the solar system. It has a thick atmosphere, weather, lakes, chemistry, and a level of environmental complexity that Saturn itself cannot offer us. It is still a brutal place for human life, but it is a place you can at least discuss in terms of habitats, infrastructure, and long-term survival. That is the real twist. Saturn gives us the spectacle. Titan may give us the foothold. So when we ask whether humans could colonize Saturn, the best scientific answer may be this: not Saturn, the planet. But perhaps one day, part of Saturn's world. And that makes the whole system even more interesting, because the most beautiful object in it is the ringed giant. But the most plausible place for a future colony may be one of its moons. Saturn only looks simple from far away, a giant planet, beautiful rings, one more gas giant in the outer solar system. But the real Saturn is much stranger than that, a planet without a surface, a ring system that may be the remains of something destroyed, a structure made mostly of ice and dust that may not last forever, and a whole family of moons, turning the planet into the center of a much larger and more complicated world. So where did the rings come from? Most likely from destruction. Why do they have that shape? Because Saturn's gravity and its moons keep the material from ever becoming something simpler. And could humans colonize Saturn? Saturn itself, almost certainly not. But the Saturn system, especially Titan, is a very different question. And maybe that is what makes Saturn such a strong subject for this channel. It is beautiful, not because it is simple. It is beautiful because behind that beauty is one of the strangest balances in the entire solar system. I'm Lone Colonist. See you on the next world.